I recently turned 30 and this milestone in my life had me reflecting a lot on all of my past travels, so I thought I'd make a video to share what I have learned. For those of you who are new here, my first real travel experience is when I studied abroad in Barcelona in 2016 and I fell in love with it. During that semester abroad, I visited 11 countries, including a trip to Thailand for our spring break where I met people who were teaching English abroad and traveling the world full time, which I didn't even know was a thing, so I was so hooked on this idea. Fast forward to 2018, after graduating with my master's, I finally decided it was time to follow that dream. So I taught English for a year in Chongqing, China, then backpacked Asia, Australia, and New Zealand for 6 months, then another teaching contract in Prague, and another one in Vietnam after that, followed by a few years on end of working remote and traveling full-time through Eastern Europe and South America. And that leads me to 2023, so 5 years later, I accepted a full-time position in London where Nick and I have called home for almost a year and a half now. During all these travels, I have visited over 55 countries on 6 continents, and it's truly been a dream come true. So let me share 15 travel lessons I learned from all of those travels in my 20s. First, and probably the most important, you don't need a lot of money to travel. The amount of times I had people from back home reach out to me, or even just really mean comments on social media asking me how I got so much money to travel, or saying how it must be nice to have rich parents to pay for all my travels, is part of this idea that I'm trying to show the world isn't true. Traveling is so expensive. It just really isn't. It just depends on how you do it. In places like Southeast Asia and South America, you can literally spend 20 to 30 US dollars total per day, including accommodation, food, and activities. So think about that. That's incredibly cheap. When I did my 6-month backpacking trip throughout Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, I spent roughly 6,000 US dollars for 6 months. And honestly, most of that was spent the last 2 months when I got to Australia and New Zealand, because obviously it's pretty expensive there. I bet that's way cheaper than your normal monthly spending back home. So I really want that to resonate with you. If you want to travel but think it's too expensive, it's not. Take the leap of faith and just do it. It'll be cheaper than you think in most places. And to help you get started, check out my budget travel tips to help you save money. The second point is kind of an extension of the first, but you don't need expensive equipment to travel. I see so many influencers posting videos about this $300+ backpack that you need, or a suitcase that you need, with all this gear and equipment to make the most of your travels. And I promise you don't need any of it. They're just trying to make money off of you. I've always had a budget backpack and budget travel accessories, and I've never had any issues or felt like it impacted my trip negatively. I made a carry-on packing video recently showing people my favorite carry-on backpack that fits the Ryanair dimensions, which is a budget airline in Europe that's extremely strict on their baggage allowance dimensions, and it's only 30 bucks. Like, so many people commented saying, thank you. Thank you for actually putting an affordable bag on here. And it's those comments that make me super happy, and also drives me crazy that all these other videos and influencers have convinced people that this is the norm, or that you need to have this expensive equipment in order to travel, because I'm sure it deters people from even getting started if they can't afford that $300 backpack from the start. So buy that $30 backpack and your one-way plane ticket. I promise you won't regret it. Number 3, don't wait for people to travel. Go solo. This one can seem super intimidating for first-time travelers, or honestly any traveler, especially for women, for safety reasons. And I will say I was super intimidated my first time too. I had originally planned a trip to Costa Rica with someone who ended up canceling, so I basically had to decide if I wanted to cancel too and lose all the money I'd spent, or just go on my own. And I remember sitting in the airport thinking, what am I doing? This is crazy. But it was truly one of the best experiences I've ever had, and it gave me the confidence to travel to over 13 countries on my own at this point. It's like ripping off a band-aid. You just have to do the first one. Just don't think about it, just do it. And once you do it, you'll realize it's not as scary as you thought, and you'll want to do it all the time. Because I will say, most people say that they want to travel or this looks like fun, but when it comes time to actually planning or paying for a trip, they aren't as keen to do that. So you don't want to put your travel dreams on hold for anyone who's just not willing to commit. Make them happen for yourself. When you're traveling solo, you meet so many amazing travelers in your hostels or out on day trips that you sign up for. You really won't be lonely, and you'll be surrounded by people with the exact same mindset as you. They just want to travel. They want to experience new things. I've met some of the coolest girls on my solo trip just in my female-only dorm room that I ended up spending days traveling with. So again, to recap, don't wait for other people to travel or you'll be waiting forever. Take the plunge. And if you want some solo travel tips, check out this video. Number 4, figure out what kind of traveler you are so you can have the best experience, and know that this will change as you age. This will help you whether you're solo traveling or traveling with people, because you want to make sure you're having the best possible experience. For me, I've always been a traveler, not a vacationer. I love to have a backpack on my back, seeing as much as I possibly can, really immersing myself in the local culture and doing things in the most budget way possible so my backpacking trip can last as long as possible. But you might prefer an all-inclusive resort focused on relaxing and not really seeing or doing too much. Or you might not feel comfortable planning your trip on your own, so you'd rather join a tour and not really think about any of the logistics. Try and figure out your style to help you plan in the best way. And the longer you travel, meaning the older you get, your travel style will change and evolve. That's okay, let it. I'm 30 years old now. I'm done with hostel dorm rooms, but from the ages of 20 to probably 28-ish, I still stayed in a few hostels after 28, but that's when I was kind of feeling over it. I absolutely loved them because I saved a lot of money, I met tons of really cool travelers, and it really embodied the full travel experience to me. So now I know every trip is going to be slightly more expensive than before because I prefer a hotel room, not a hostel bed, but that's okay. I had 10 years of the rough backpacker life and I wouldn't change it for anything. Number 5, to piggyback off the last point, if you do travel with other people, talk about what kind of travelers they are and what their expectations are for your trip before you go, so you're on the same page. Even though someone may be your best friend, they might not be good to travel with based on your own travel style. I've traveled with other vacationers before and it's not fun for either of us, so it would have been better to have that conversation beforehand and realize I should have just done a solo trip instead so I could do what I wanted to do. I'm incredibly lucky to have Nick, who is relatively the same type of traveler as I am. I mean, I'm a little bit more intense, wanting to do like 30,000 steps a day, see absolutely everything, and he'd probably rather mix in like a little bit of relaxing time, but he's definitely not a vacationer. So it makes our travels amazing because we're both getting what we wanted. I remember when we were living in Vietnam doing a couples trip. So there were 4 couples, 8 of us in total, and we decided to do a beach weekend trip to Lanai, Vietnam, which is just a few hours outside of Ho Chi Minh where we were living. And we did not have that travel conversation beforehand. And on day 1, we all decided to rent motorbikes. We started exploring the nearby sand dunes, going sand sledding, even quadding on the sand dunes. And one couple quickly got very annoyed with us and said, all they wanted to do was have drinks by the pool, so they were going back to the hostel. They were done, which was fine, but we continued to do what we wanted to do. They did what they wanted to do, and another couple on the trip really wanted to do what we wanted to do as well. So we quickly realized that these were more our type of people and our travelers, and it would probably be our last trip with that other couple. And a full circle moment, that fun couple is actually who we were visiting when we came to the UK a year and a half ago, and then I ended up getting a job in London on the visit here, moving here permanently, which was never the original plan. So we still hang out with that amazing couple almost 4 years later. It's crazy the incredible friendships you get from traveling. Next, make sure to follow safety protocols anytime you're traveling, but especially solo. When you're out there solo, your gut feeling becomes your best friend. It's your internal compass guiding you through unfamiliar territory, so trust it. If something feels off, it probably is. Maybe it's that creepy vibe you're getting from a stranger, or a situation just doesn't sit right with you. Whatever it is, listen to that inner voice, and when you do spot those red flags, don't ignore them. Take action. Remember, your safety always comes first, always. And something else that comes with safety is always having a working phone plan. This is crucial to your safety for getting around, using maps, and being able to contact people in case anything goes wrong. For more information on how how to use your phone abroad, check out this video. But also, in addition to simply having a working phone plan abroad, I highly recommend sharing your location indefinitely with family and friends. That way, if anything does go wrong, they can see where you're at and hopefully get some help. When I first started traveling abroad, even on that first solo trip to Costa Rica, I didn't want to pay for an international phone plan, and I didn't really know about local SIMs or anything like that. So I just kept my phone on airplane mode the whole time. Luckily, nothing ever happened to me, but it is dangerous. And once I started getting local SIM cards and having my phone work abroad, I realized just that sense of security having a working phone brings you, it's priceless. Next, going outside of your comfort zone will make you grow more than you ever expected. This is probably my favorite thing I've gotten out of traveling. Of course, the things I've seen, people I've met, and food I've tried around the world have all been incredible, but I honestly didn't realize how much it would change me for the better. It was really scary moving to China, not having ever visited the country and not knowing the language, and there were days where I was so frustrated with getting lost, not being able to get help because no one could understand me, or trying some unidentified food that got me extremely sick. And in those moments, I would just think, why did I move here? But it was so incredible to see my growth during that year of living in China, being able to navigate the entire country's railway system, traveling to tiny villages where many people have never even seen a foreigner before, walking around the village, and making friends with those people without even being able to speak the same language. You know, just sharing a beer, sharing a meal, or even just a smile with people from all over the country, using chopsticks like a pro by the time I left. Just so many little things that used to be difficult or frustrating or even intimidating, and realizing I was doing them with ease now. It was so cool to see the growth in such a short amount of time. I've never experienced that much growth in 1 year, and of course I continue to grow with all my travels, like facing fears to take a helicopter up to a glacier in New Zealand for a glacier hike, or swimming with whale sharks in the Philippines. Every experience that might have scared you or intimidated you, but you just did it, helped you grow into a better person, and that's what travel does for you constantly. Next, be okay with things not going according to plan. My entire life, I have been a type A, OCD, kind of controlling person. It was a huge flaw I always hated in myself, and I wanted to be more go with the flow and not try to control and plan everything type of person. And of course, I still consider myself a type A person today, but I'm way more relaxed. I'm way more go with the flow and flexible. I remember when I first started traveling, I would plan my trips to a T, like literally. Wake up at 7:30, go to this temple at 8, eat breakfast at this specific restaurant at 9 a.m. You get the picture? And if anything disrupted the plan, which anyone who has traveled before knows it's almost guaranteed to get messed up or changed at some point, I would get really upset. I'd get stressed that we were missing something or that the day was ruined because we didn't see everything that was on my list that I had planned. And the more I traveled, the more relaxed I got. The more I realized travel and life in general doesn't go according to plan, and that's the beauty of it. I started to see that some of my favorite travel memories were the times where we got lost and we stumbled down a random alley and found the best noodle shop I've ever eaten at, or missing our scheduled train meant that we actually got another night in a place that I really loved. It just completely changed my way of thinking and changed me as a person. Yes, I still research, I still plan things when I travel now, but it's a very loose plan, very open to change and things going wrong, and I actually embrace those moments now. Next is create a budget and stick to it, giving yourself a cushion for the unexpected. This is really hard to do and also goes back to figuring out what type of traveler you are or what type of trip this is. If you know you're a vacationer and you're doing just a 1 week all-inclusive trip to Greece, then by all means, spend as much money as you want, treat yourself. But if you have a backpack on your back, you bought a one-way flight to Bangkok, and you're just gonna travel for as long as your money will last, make sure to set a budget. Do a lot of research on how expensive the hostels are, how much the flights are to the next destination, average food, activities that you know you absolutely can't miss, and when you come up with the daily amount, add a small cushion to give yourself some wiggle room. This is extremely important to do for yourself, but also to have that conversation with anyone that you're traveling with. Last year, my sister bought a one-way flight to Thailand in February, and her goal was to last until the end of June and fly home from Tokyo, so a solid 5-month backpacking trip. But her and her boyfriend, who he has never traveled before, they never had that budget conversation, husband, and long story short, he ran out of money real quick and they were home by the end of March, having only gone to Thailand and Vietnam, which really crushed her because she had so many plans and things that she wanted to see in Bali, the Philippines, and of course making her way all the way up to South Korea and Japan. So it's extremely important to set a budget, and there are tons of apps that will help you track your spending while you're on your trip to make sure you're sticking to that budget. Next, now this might seem a little counterintuitive from the last point, but hear me out. Find a balance of saving money but not missing out on once in a lifetime experiences. This is why I tell you to build a cushion in, because if you're in a cheap destination like Southeast Asia, you will most likely come in under budget every day. If you're in a hostel, eating street food and doing free activities, that extra cushion will start to add up to allow you to make sure you don't miss must-see activities like the elephant jungle sanctuary in Thailand or the heli hike in New Zealand that I mentioned earlier. I believe it was around $300 US. So right away my budget brain was like, no way in hell am I doing that. But a girl I met in my hostel had just finished her New Zealand road trip and was giving me all of these tips and advice, and she said the heli hike was an absolute must. Like, I could not leave without doing it or I'd regret it. So I took a look at my budget and realized I had saved a lot more than I thought in certain places. So I could do it if I wanted, but it would take up my entire cushion of my budget. But I have to agree with her, it was absolutely worth it. One of my favorite things I have done to this day, and I genuinely wouldn't have done it if I wouldn't have met her and had her tell me it's an absolute must, just because I'm so budget conscious. So yes, stick to your budget, have that cushion, but always make sure if there are those once in a lifetime experiences in a destination, you don't skip them due to cost, because you will regret them. Next is get a credit card with no international transaction fees and a debit card with no ATM fees. So in more Western and modern places like Europe, a credit card with no international transaction fees is your best friend. You pretty much will never need cash, and it makes paying for stuff easier for your entire trip. But for more cash-driven societies like Southeast Asia, South America, Africa, make sure to get a debit card with no international ATM fees, because those will really start to add up. And whether you're making a purchase on your credit card or pulling out money from an ATM on your debit card, always pay in the local currency and it will give you a better rate automatically. Charles Schwab has a great debit card with no foreign ATM transaction fees, and of course there are tons of great credit cards out there with no international transaction fees. But if you are looking for one with no yearly fee and decent cash or points back, then I can highly recommend the Capital One Quicksilver card, which I'll link in the description below. Now, I've mentioned this a few times casually, but I wanted to make this an entire point on the list. Embrace hostels. They're a great way to save money and meet fellow travelers, especially the younger you are. Anytime I've met a cool person while traveling that I ended up spending a day or even a few days traveling with, it was because I met them in my hostel. When traveling solo, I always do female only dorm rooms, so I usually meet girls in the room, or even when it's me and Nick, we usually just meet people by hanging out in the common areas of the hostels. Hostels are a lot more social than hotels. They usually have bars, games, tons of areas with hammocks, beanbag chairs. It's just a very social space where most people are hanging out in the common rooms rather than their rooms. So it's easy to grab a drink and just start chatting with people. On top of this, like I mentioned before, hostels will save you so much money in the long run compared to hotels. For more information on staying in a hostel for your first time, check out this video. Next is find the balance of exploring and relaxing. Make sure both your physical and mental health comes first. This more so applies to longer trips, not just like a week-long trip, but like I mentioned before, I am always go, go, go when traveling. I want to see it all, and the more I've traveled, the more I've realized how important it is to plan in days of relaxation and reset myself to make sure I'm enjoying my trip to the fullest and not getting burnt out. For example, a few years ago, we spent 2 months backpacking Turkey, my favorite country in the world, and 2 months is a long time. You can't just go, go, go for 2 months straight. So we strategically planned it so we'd be go, go, go in Istanbul and Ephesus for a few days, then headed down to Fethiye on the coast to relax on the beach for a few days before moving to the next destination. And we continued the trip like that. So we got to plop down on the beach, not do much. We booked a hotel rather than a hostel for those few nights and just reset for 3 days. Then we continued on backpacking, exploring, staying in hostels the next week. So we just continued like that. So just remember, the longer your trip is, the more important it is to have those rest days and take care of both your mental and physical health. Next, you need to download a VPN or a virtual private network, and essentially what it does is establish a digital connection between your computer and a remote server owned by a VPN provider. It encrypts your personal data, masks your IP address, and lets you sidestep website blocks and firewalls on the internet. So what does that really mean? For travelers, it means two very important things. Number one, it keeps your personal data extremely safe when you're on public networks, when traveling, like hotels, restaurants, airports, cafes. And number two, it allows you to access websites and content that are blocked by that region or country's servers. A big one here is streaming services. I first got introduced to VPNs when I moved to China because, for those of you who don't know, literally everything is blocked in China. Google, Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, you name it. So basically, if you want to live in China and access any of these sites, you have to get a VPN. But I've had one ever since living in China because I think it's a must when traveling internationally. Watch this video to learn more about VPNs and which ones to download, and I'll even put my Surfshark VPN link in the description below. And last but certainly not least, living abroad is one of the best ways to not only get to travel more, but to actually dive into a new culture and language like never before. Of course, I love traveling and going on holidays, but honestly, I think I love living abroad more. Like, it can be challenging trying to find an apartment, set up a bank account, or even go grocery shopping in a foreign country, but living a daily life in a completely new country and new culture is so incredible. You learn so much about yourself and about that country, about those people, more than you could ever try to learn on a vacation. And on top of that, you have a daily life that's exciting, it's fun. You're also able to have a home base that will allow you to travel so much during that time that you live there. When living in China for a year, not only did I travel all over China, which is obviously a massive country, but I was also able to visit about 10 other countries as well. And my first year alone living here in London, I was able to visit 12 countries. So yes, most of the time your life is normal, going to work Monday through Friday, but there's something a little bit more exciting about it compared to a normal Monday through Friday back home. And you have the opportunity to travel so much, so easily, and for a lot cheaper since you're already out there. And if you want to move abroad but not really sure how to get started, teaching English abroad is by far the best way to get started. So check out this video that will give you all the info you need to get your first teaching job abroad.